Streamed, Eric? Where'd Eric go? I don't know. Is this being streamed? Yes. Okay. So those of you who are watching, oh, I have to say that whole thing over again? Oh my God. No, thank you. Okay. No one wants to hear that a second time. Anyway, for those of you who are streaming, welcome as well, and a good Yontif, a good year to everyone. Certainly with God's blessings for health, and certainly for peace. So tonight we have a very, very special man with us, Alex Kaur, who's going to talk about what brings him here. And of course, it is about his mom. And her story is one of those incredible Holocaust stories that after we hear about it, and for those of you who wish to purchase his book, it's in the back, which is a story that certainly no one will ever forget, as well as no one should ever forget. But as you all might be aware, or many of you are aware, there's another element to this, which is all about the idea of forgiveness. And I'm going to leave this up to Alex to talk about that later on. But if I may just put my rabbinic foot in this situation here of forgiveness, is that we're coming up to, of course, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, in which we ask other people to do what, Sheila? We ask them to forgive us of any misdeeds that we've done, any hurts we've committed against someone else. The mitzvah is to do teshuvah, to ask people to forgive us and to say, I'm sorry, okay? However, there is no mitzvah to do what? To give someone forgiveness. We are not required to within Judaism. And that's a whole nother discussion, and we'll leave that for a future time, but I just leave that kind of hanging there as the evening progresses. So I'm going to give this to Alex, the microphone. I'm going to try to sound the shofar, say a prayer for me that it comes out. Sometimes my lips are working. The shofar is the same. That's the interesting thing about, I'm going to give a whole sermon here. I'm sorry, Alex. That's the interesting thing about the shofar. The shofar doesn't change, I change. And that's what makes this a little more complicated. Okay. Amen. Shana Tova.
Toda Rabah.
Alex.
Toda Rabah. Thank you. So hi, it's great to be here. This is an incredible audience. I want to thank Rabbi Moss and Temple Sinai. So my name is Alex Kaur. Hopefully we're going to have some echoes here. And I am the son of actually 2 Holocaust survivors. And so we're going to talk a little bit about both. I think and I hope that when you leave here tonight, hopefully you'll be inspired, hopefully you'll be motivated. Some of you may cry. I actually usually cry at some point. That's why I have the water here. The other thing, when some people here knew my parents, particularly my parents had this incredible sense of humor. And despite the subject matter that we're going to talk about, I would be doing my parents a big, big disservice if during the time that I spoke about them that I didn't at least allow you to laugh. So there's going to be some funny stories, and whether you laugh or not is your choice, but I think that it shows you how people get through difficult times. A lot of people, let's see if this is working, excellent. So a lot of people ask me, how did this all come about? I have a co-author. He's not here with me. He's not Jewish. And every Saturday night in Indianapolis, where I live, I'm a full-time podiatrist. I do this on the side. We have dinner on Saturday night, and in August of 2023, we were having dinner, and my dad had died about 1.5 years earlier. My mom passed away, which we'll talk about in July of 2019, and I had been wanting to tell my dad's story. And so he said, you keep on talking about writing a book. When are you going to write a book? And he had written 2 previous books about Butler basketball and business. And he said, look, I'll send you some questions tonight. That was August of 2023. Obviously, 2 months later, October 7th happened. We finished writing the book in January of 2024, and it came out in May of 2024. And so with that in mind, a lot of people ask about the title. And there's a lot of reasons for the title. A blessing, not a burden. As many of us know, we are all a product of our past. And each of our pasts has different journeys. And for me, one of the things that happened to me along the way is when I was in podiatry school, I was diagnosed with cancer. And so I will try a first joke here. So I have something in common with Lance Armstrong. No, I didn't win the Tour de France. No, I didn't date Sheryl Crow. And I definitely didn't do performance-enhancing drugs. But we had the same cancer, the same doctor. And so when I was in middle of podiatry school, 26 years old, I had cancer. I thought I was going to die. It spread to my lung. And I was in Chicago, and my mom calls me, and she kept on saying, pick up the phone. I kept on hitting delete. I wouldn't answer. It was the old days of the voicemail. And so finally one message got through, and she said, look, I know you're there. Quit feeling sorry for yourself. Your dad's a survivor. I'm a survivor. You're going to be a survivor. This is your Auschwitz. So, when you hear those words, you're 26 years old, and I thought, yeah, I need to quit feeling sorry for myself. And so I honestly believe that, the old adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But for me, having two parents who survived something terrible did make it easier for me to conquer a different foe. And I truly believe that being a child of two Holocaust survivors made it much easier for me to survive cancer. That was in 1987. So that's another reason for a blessing, not a burden. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a tour. We're going to talk a little bit about my father. They're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about my mom. And then we're going to talk about me, maybe some life lessons. And then we have a surprise guest that will be coming via technology, which some of you may know. So my father is from Riga, Latvia, one of the Baltic states. And he was one of four boys. My father came from a very religious Jewish family. And so he played soccer as a kid, and in 1939, his oldest brother was part of the Latvian Navy, and the boat that he was on, he was a navigator, was captured by the Nazis. His Latvian comrades told the Nazis he was Jewish. He was killed and thrown overboard, and that was the first loss my dad had. He was 14 years old. 2 years later, my dad's father, my grandfather, was on his way to work. He happened to be a shoe cobbler, so I guess shoes and feet run in the family because I'm a podiatrist. I didn't know this when I went into podiatry school. But my grandfather's on his way to work wearing very traditional Jewish garb, if you will. And the Nazis already had restrictions in place where you could eat, where you could walk, where you could stand, where you could work. And my grandfather was walking. They told him to go to the other side of the street. He kept on walking. They killed him without any questions. So my dad's a teenager, 14, 15 years old. Loses his oldest brother, loses his father. The family is taken from their home to the Riga ghetto, and my grandmother wanted to have some semblance for her youngest boy, my dad, of still being Jewish. So she brought the tablecloth from the house in her skirt so that on Shabbat dinner in the ghetto, with no table, with no silverware, they had a tablecloth so my father could still have some semblance of having Shabbat dinner. In the ghetto, there were my dad and his two older brothers and his mother. And at some point, after several months, they're going to liquidate the ghetto, which in this audience knows what that means, is they're going to decide who's going to live and who's going to die. And so typically what they would do is men and younger men that could work one side of the ghetto, children, babies, elderly, and women other side of the ghetto. So even though my father was 14 or 15 years old, he was young, looked younger for his age. He was kind of a mama's boy, so he went to the side of the ghetto with his mother, my grandmother, Mirka. And my grandmother, Mirka, pleads with my father, no, you go with your brothers. Go to the other side of the ghetto. My father said, no, if they kill you, my life's not worth living. Well, obviously, my grandmother won the argument. He went to the side with his two brothers. And on November 30th, 1941, there was a massacre called the Rumbla Massacre. There's a Rumbla forest near the ghetto. And my grandmother that's where she was killed. A couple days afterwards, somehow my dad was allowed to go to the site of the massacre and saw a baby doll on the ground. Last summer, I was in Riga, and we went to the site of the massacre, and I put a baby doll at the site of the memorial. So now my father is with his two brothers, and the camp gets liquidated, and they get sent to another camp called Kaiserwald. And this is all starting in 1941, because we're going to compare this to my mom's story. And so 1942, 43, Kaiserwald. Then he gets transferred. They get transferred to Stutthof, which is the northern part of Poland. En route to Stutthof, the second oldest brother, Shlomo, kills a Nazi, ends up in Germany, eventually in Israel, future Jewish homeland of Israel. So now for the next 2 years, my father is with brother Leo, and they're now near Buchenwald. I talked to somebody about Buchenwald. It was a sub-camp of Buchenwald, Magdeburg. And so now we're going to reset the time. It's now April of 1945. The Nazis have told my dad and his other captives, if you will, that they're going to be taken to safer area. What does that mean? They're going to be on a death march. So my father is with my uncle on a death march. My dad's 19 or 20 now. My uncle's older, mid to late 20s. And so my dad is thinking they're going to kill us anyway. So it was dusk. They were on a ravine, and there's a little break between the Nazis, and my dad's going to make a go for it. When my dad started lecturing in the 90s, and you'll understand why I tell you this, everything he spoke about with the Holocaust was sports analogies. So he would tell kids, well, I ran like, of all people, Edgerrin James, University of Miami, and the Indianapolis Colts. I ran dodging bullets, finally hiding in the ruins of a building. The rumor was that the Americans were coming into the area to liberate. For the next several hours, my father hears fierce fighting. Now he's just worried. He doesn't know where his brother is, but he's just worried he's going to get killed by an errant bullet, an errant grenade, hiding. He's got lice all over him. His clothes are in shambles. And then for about 2 hours, he hears silence. Nothing. Then he hears this weird language, and my dad was great with languages. He knew it wasn't Hebrew, wasn't German, wasn't Latvian, so he came up with his hands up. 2 American GIs gave him a Coca-Cola. One was Wendell Knox from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Mr. Knox said, how's it feel to be free? My dad knew the word free. He said, good. For the rest of my dad's life, Coca-Cola was the drink. When I was a little kid, I never knew what Pepsi was. Swear to God, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we had Coca-Cola. So my father drinks the Coca-Cola. The 2 GIs were worried that their superior officer would think of my father. They knew he was a Holocaust survivor. He still had the lice all over him. So they hid him the next 2 days from their superior officer. So on the 3rd day, the superior officer by the name of Andrew Neff meets my father. Mr. Neff was from this place called Terre Haute, Indiana. And Mr. Neff was an engineer by trade. This battalion was primarily responsible for building bridges ahead of the military forces. Rarely were they in combat. And so Mr. Neff is going to interrogate my father to see if he should stay with the troops, the battalion. Well, my father was very impressive. My father spoke a bunch of the dialects, knew the terrain. So Mr. Neff said, we'll give him GI clothes. So my dad was given GI clothes. The day this happened was April 15th, 1945. Ironically, my birthday is April 15th, years later. And so, I'm not that old. And so, for the next 3 weeks, my father was with the battalion. He starts learning English and really likes the Americans. And then finally, in early May, they are going to encounter a battle. And Mr. Neff says, Mickey, I know you have a gun. I actually recently just found a picture with my dad with a gun with Mr. Neff. He said, I know you have a gun, but you don't know how to use it. I can't be responsible. We need to put you in a refugee camp. So my father looks at Mr. Neff and says, I want to go where you're from, wherever this Terre Haute, Indiana is. So my father's in a refugee camp, and he's writing letters. One of these letters ends up on the doorstep of Mrs. Neff in Terre Haute. By now, Mr. Neff is in Great Britain. She telegrams her husband and says, that little boy wants to come to Terre Haute. And so my dad's now 19 or 20. And so he contacts the GIs. This is now post-war. And so my father is the Mr. Knox and a couple other GIs find my dad in the refugee camp. For the next year, my father hung out in bars and restaurants reading the military newspaper Stars and Stripes. Some of you may know that. That's how I learned how to read English. This, if you look closely, this is a Coca-Cola malt. Like I tell you, everything was Coca-Cola. And so they were in bars and restaurants, and here and there he was helping them. Mr. Neff now is back in Indiana. My dad's 4 years of high school or 4 years of concentration camp and ghettos. So Mr. Neff knew my dad wanted an education, needed an education. So he, in the Vigo County Terre Haute School Corporation, was sending all these letters that my dad sent. This is a letter from my dad to Mr. Neff from Frankfurt to Terre Haute. He's giving all these letters to the school corporation in Terre Haute. So sure enough, they admit my father. By this time, my father found out that Leo had survived. He was in Hartford, Connecticut. Shlomo, the second oldest brother, was now in Israel, working for a newspaper. You might have heard of it, Mahariv, which is an Israeli newspaper. And so it would have been after 48, just to be correct. So my father boards the SS Marine Flasher, May 11th, 1946, from Germany with 7 other Holocaust survivors, ends up in New York, takes a train to Terre Haute. So my father, the idea was to finish 3 years of high school and then go to college. Well, my father was a quick learner. He tested out of 2 years of high school, and he graduates after 1 year of high school. So he wants to now go to college, and he lived next door to the Neff family. They had 3 kids of their own, and the family he lived with owned a pharmacy, so he would work in the pharmacy. So he decides he wants to be a pharmacist, so he enrolls at Indiana State Teachers College, which is now Indiana State University. Everybody in Indiana, which I'm sure everybody in Delray Beach in 1946 or 47 is not talking about soccer. In Indiana, they're talking about this game called basketball. My father, on a good day, on a really good day, was 5'2". So my father, he doesn't understand basketball, he knows soccer. Well, he finds out that in his first class subjects, he's going to take the gym class, and the rumor is that the gym teacher is also the basketball coach. Some of you may know that basketball coach, some guy by the name of John Wooden. That's right, the John Wooden. So Coach Wooden, for some of you that don't know, All-American at Purdue. This was his first college coaching job, Indiana State, now Indiana State University. So my father was very studious in gym class, and so Coach Wooden recognized this, and halfway through the semester says, "Mickey, I need to talk to you." So my dad thought he was in trouble. He said, "Mickey, you're doing such a great job. You're such a good influence on these younger students." My dad was 22 by now. "I want you to take the class next semester. You're going to get an A this semester. You're going to get an A next semester." They became friends. The following year, if you know history, Coach Wooden gets a job at UCLA, wins 10 national titles. My dad goes to pharmacy school at Purdue. In 1997, Coach Wooden was honored in Terre Haute with some other guy. I don't know if you know him. His name's Larry Bird. And so my dad sat at Coach Wooden's table, and my mom took this picture. And so we were always big UCLA fans growing up. So that's a little bit, I know that's quick, but it's a little bit about my father's story, and that's really one of the reasons I wrote the book. Now we're going to talk about my mom. Some of you may know, as Rabbi said, some people to this day still misconstrue her path to healing, which I'll try to explain. So my mom is from the Transylvanian Valley, Ports, Romania. My mom also from a very religious family. There were 2 older girls, Edith and Elise. My grandfather, who I'm named after, Alexander, was hoping for a boy. And so now my grandmother is pregnant again, hoping for a boy. The midwife comes to deliver. There's no ultrasound. The midwife comes to deliver, and out comes a girl. And then she says, there's another one coming. And with great disappointment, my mom enters into this world, Eva. And so my mom always felt like the black sheep of the family. Anytime the girls got in trouble, my mom was always the one that was punished. My mom and my aunt were identical twins. You can see on the pictures. My mom, for whatever reason, is almost always on the left. So the baby picture there, she's on the left. The other picture was the last family picture taken. My mom's sitting down on the left, my grandmother's sitting down in the dress, my aunt to the right, my grandfather in the black coat, the two older sisters flanking him, a friend to the far right, and a cousin laying down on the ground. So my mom, at the age of 5 or 6, and if you know history, Hungary, Romania, the Transylvanian Valley was supposedly going to be saved from the Nazis. So 1939, 1940, 41, my dad's already in a ghetto. 1942, my mom is still going to school. She could sense, she's 7 years old, she could sense something was wrong. One day after dinner, they put the 4 girls in a room to play with dolls, and my mom and my grandmother and grandfather were listening to the radio. So my mom, being the troublemaker, puts her ear to the door and hears somebody in German saying bad things about the Jews. It was Hitler. My mom, at the age of 6 or 7, told her dad, "Daddy, we should leave. I hear bad things." He said, "Oh, stupid girl, you don't know what you're talking about. You're just a little girl. You play with your dolls and do your chores." He did go with his brother to Palestine in 1942 to see if they had to leave Europe. He came back very excited, and unfortunately, my grandmother said, "Well, how can we travel with the 2 little twin girls?" So they never left, and my mom always resented that, regretted that, was always bitter about that. And so, sure enough, 1943, things start getting bad. Their teacher, all of a sudden, is replaced by a Nazi sympathizer. And my mom remembers a math problem. If you have 5 Jews and you kill 2 Jews, how many Jews are left? And my mom and my aunt, 7 years old, they were the only Jewish kids in the class, went home and said, "Mommy, everybody makes fun of us. Why do we have to take it?" And by now their window of opportunity was gone, had closed. And my grandmother says, "Well, we have no choice. We just have to take it." And sure enough, in 1944, March, they're taken from their home, put in a ghetto. The girl to the far right on the picture on the right, her dad was a preacher. She would throw food across the barbed wire to my mom and her sister so they could eat something. And then, sure enough, they were put in a cattle car. Nobody told them where they were going. There was no sign to wherever. They had a little peephole in the cattle car, and every 7, 8, 9 hours through the peephole, they would get refueling, and through the peephole, they could get a little spritz of water for gold watches. And the bathroom was in the corner. If you died, you either were thrown overboard or the other corner. So you can just imagine after 3.5 days of conditions. So finally, after the 3rd day, when they had the exchange for the gold watches, the language was no longer Hungarian, it was German. And they knew that they were in trouble. They knew that this was bad. So the cattle car starts slowing down prematurely, and they thought, well, this is it. Something's going to happen. So my grandfather, Alexander, takes the family in the corner of the cattle car and says, if anybody survives wherever we're going, you go to the future Jewish homeland of Israel. So the cattle car's doors open. It's nighttime. All of a sudden, this is where they're at, the selection platform at Auschwitz. My mom and my aunt were 10 years old. There's a big step from the cattle car down to the selection platform, so my mom and my aunt hold on to their mother's arms like this. And my mom steps down looking around. She feels like she's landed on Mars. Guns, dogs barking, people screaming, yelling, and she realizes that all of a sudden her daddy and her 2 older sisters are gone. They've been swallowed up by the crowd. So now she's holding on tight to her mother's arms with my aunt on the other side. A Nazi's running up and down the selection platform yelling, "Twins, twins," in German. My mom and my aunt looked alike, red dresses, dressed alike. A Nazi asked my grandmother, "Are they twins?" And before my grandmother said yes, 3 Nazis jump out and tear my mom and my aunt away from their mother. The last thing my mom remembers is my grandmother's arms extended being pulled away. And the one thing my mom, if she were here today, she would tell you, the one regret she has was she did not know this was the last time she would see her mother. She wished she would have been able to say goodbye. So they're taken to a barracks where they're being tattooed. My mom's number is A7063. My aunt's number is A7064. They're then taken to another barracks where it's all female twins, ages 3 to 14, all girl twins. My mom thought this is crazy. So they were given something that looked like bread. They hadn't eaten in 3 days, 3.5 days, and my mom and my aunt were raised to be kosher. And so my mom and my aunt tell the other twins, the other older twins, well, we're not eating this because we're kosher, and we're not eating this until we see our parents. One of the older twins said, well, if you don't eat it, the rats will eat it. You'll see them. And if you want to wait for your parents, see the smoke in the distance, that's where your parents are. And my mom and my aunt said, oh, that's crazy. Who would be burning bodies? And one of the older twins said, oh, well, you'll find out tomorrow. So sure enough, 5 a.m. the next morning, a big entourage enters the barracks, and somebody yells, Mengele's coming, Mengele's coming. So all the twins, aged 3 to 13, stand like little toy soldiers, and Mengele was inspecting his new guinea pigs. My mom and my aunt were 2 of those guinea pigs. For those of you who don't know, and I think most people do, Mengele did experiments on twins, 1,500 sets of twins, about 3,000 twins, boys and girls, ages 3 to 14. And if one twin died during the experiment, they would kill the other twin to do comparative autopsies. Why were they doing these experiments? It's a great question. I've met over 100 of the twins over the years, and to a person, all the twins would say they thought they were part of experiments for fertility drugs. David Marlowe did a book about 5 years ago. I'm not a geneticist, I'm a podiatrist, and he's not a geneticist, but he had good evidence to indicate that probably if you were trying to develop fertility drugs, you would probably test the mothers of the twins rather than the twins themselves. But besides the point, this question of this slide, why was my mom not sent to the gas chambers? I just told you if my father, age 9 or 10, would have been sent immediately. The only reason that my mom was not sent was because she was being used in medical experiments. On the right here, it's a little hard to read. Number 12 and 13 is Moses. Miriam Moses, Eva Moses, that's my mom. It's my mom's maiden name. Those are some of the other twins. We got this from the Auschwitz Museum. And so these experiments for my mom started in May of 44. They had started about 6 to 7 months earlier, but for my mom, she arrived in May of 44. 3-4 days a week, they had blood drawn from them, things injected, never told what they were being, there was no informed consent. When I talk to doctors and residents and researchers, when you go and get a flu shot, you're given what's called an informed consent. There was no informed consent for any of the Mengele twins. And so the other 3 days a week, they would be in a barracks, naked, boys and girls, ages 3 to 14, their body parts compared, the size of nose compared to their twin, to charts. Those experiments were not so dangerous, but they were very demeaning because they were naked. A couple anecdotal stories along the way. In August of 44, my mom one day noticed the Nazi guard, was not outside the barracks. So she stood outside and looked up and sees a plane circling Auschwitz. My mom's 10 years old. She looks closely at the plane and sees an American flag. When I heard this story when I was in my early 30s, I go, wait a second. How do you know it's a flag, American flag? There's no TV, there's no internet. How would you know this? Well, Alex, I had an aunt in Cleveland, Ohio, and when we were younger, back in Romania, I would always open up the mail. And every 3 or 4 months, we got a letter from my aunt, and on the letter was an envelope, the American flag. So she put 2 and 2 together, saw the plane, it was very low. It was a reconnaissance mission circling Auschwitz so they would not bomb inside Auschwitz. And so she put 2 and 2 together. The reason I tell you this is my mom would tell you that the second she landed on the selection platform, she could no longer think like a 10-year-old. She had to think like an adult every day. So these experiments continued. At one point in October, my mom's injected with something, and Mengele looks at her. The next day, she has a bad fever, and he says, too bad. She only has 2 weeks to live. So my mom was separated from my aunt and put in these barracks. During Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance, usually on network TV, news, they show somebody crawling on the floor in this barracks. That's not my mom, but she was in those barracks. She would tell me that those barracks, people were more dead than alive. So she would call it the barracks of the living dead. She found out that there was a faucet at the end of the barracks and would crawl, I must survive, pass out, I must survive. And then she realized when she got a little water that the only way they were really assessing her, evaluating her, was her temperature. She's 10 years old. So they would put the old thermometer underneath the armpit and go see somebody else. So she would stick it out the other end so she could control her temperature. So they start looking at her fever charts, and she's feeling a little better, not much. And all of a sudden, the fever starts dropping. So after 4 weeks, she was reunited with my aunt. When my aunt was in isolation, they injected her with something. My aunt looked just like the bodies in the barracks of the living dead. So now my mom had a new project, how to get my aunt to feel better. So my mom one time volunteered to go organize potatoes. What's that mean? Steal potatoes. So this was November. Some days the Nazis were not around. And also keep in mind that because they were using medical experiments, when my mom one time was stealing potatoes and was caught, she thought for sure she was going to be hanged. They noticed that she had the Red Cross symbol, which meant she was part of the medical experiments. They let her go. So she knew she could get away with certain things. So sure enough, they're organizing potatoes, putting potatoes in their dress. All of a sudden, a Jeep pulls up. 2 Nazis jump out, start spraying bullets. The last thing my mom remembers is a rifle pointed at her head. She wakes up. She thinks she's in the hereafter. She touches the 2 bodies. They're ice cold. She realized what had happened was she fainted before they shot her. So she always told my sister and I that she always thought she had a guardian angel, and this was one of the reasons why. So she had to go back to the barracks to tell those 2 twins that had just been killed that they're sisters, that they had died. So shortly thereafterwards, those same 2 Nazis found the female twins in Birkenau, which is Auschwitz II, walked them, death march to Auschwitz I. My mom and my aunt were not killed, obviously. They get to Auschwitz I, they run into the barracks. It's now December of 44. They could hear fighting in the distance, similar to my father. They knew those Nazis were burning everything up. They were trying to destroy evidence. And so they're hiding in the barracks. And so this picture here, which we'll talk about, the girl to the far right is my aunt. The girl behind the little boy is my mom. But you'll see a better picture of my mom here in a second. So now it's January. It's snowing very hard in Poland. And one day, they're hoping against hope, will this be the day we're going to be liberated? So they were in Block 23, Barracks 23, and my mom was looking out the second floor window. She couldn't even see out the window. One of the older girls says, I see something in white moving. Ukrainian army, the Red Army, Russians, Soviets, I should say, were coming to liberate the camp. They see these young girls. They give them cookies and candy. This picture, that's my mom and my aunt at the very front of the line. I'll just make sure everybody sees. Mom, aunt. This is a famous liberation picture. It's always known as January 27, 1945. It's not January 27th. What happened was on that January 27th, the Soviets said, we're coming back in a couple weeks. So for the next several weeks, the twins were on their own. They were given some food. They came back a couple weeks later with big motion pictures. And a couple of people in this room met my mom. My mom liked attention. So they turn on the motion picture cameras. When I've seen the video, when this video starts, my mom's in the middle. I know she saw the camera and ran to the very front with my aunt. So she thought she was a movie star. So after 5 takes, on the 5th take, they just had a birthday, January 31. This is February. So they're 11 years old. My mom sticks out her tongue like a typical 11-year-old, like, we've done this 5 times, we're done. And so this picture is known as a liberation picture, but if you remember one thing, it's actually after January 27th. My mom would argue with the Auschwitz tour guides, and she said, oh, it was like February 2nd. They said, no, Eve, it was later in February. So they always would disagree. So the 2 ladies in white are with the Red Cross. The 2 twins behind my aunt, they look like they have hoodies on. Those are scarves. Those are the Changara twins. To my knowledge, they are the only two sets of twins, only set of twins still alive. They live in Israel. Their granddaughter is a pediatrics resident. I've been friends with her for a couple years. Their mother was good friends with my grandmother. They lived in a neighboring village. So after the war, my mom and my aunt ended up in an orphanage. They desperately wanted to go home. They thought, well, as 11-year-olds, if they survived, surely their parents survived. So they're in an orphanage. Mrs. Changra, the mother of those two twins, comes to the orphanage and lies and says she's related, signs them out. They eventually get back to Ports, Romania, running down the hill with great anticipation. They open the house, the door, and all that was there was a family dog. My mom would always tell audiences the Nazis killed people, didn't kill dogs. So where will they go? There was an aunt in Cluj, a neighboring town, bigger city, so they went to Cluj. Now, as you know, communists were in control. For the first 5 years after 1945, my mom had terrible nightmares. One of the reasons was that the rumor was that the soap that they used was from human flesh. So she had nightmares. These continued even until 1950. 1950, they finally get a visa to go to Israel. So with an aunt, they get to Israel, and I asked my mom, how was it in Israel? They're now teenagers. And so my mom was now in a kibbutz, 15 years old, 16 years old, with other boys and girls who were Holocaust survivors. She said, oh, Alex, this was the best time of my life. I learned how to say I love you in 10 languages. She dated. Good, you're still awake. So my mom ended up in the IDF, Israeli Army, Sergeant Major. And so they had fun. Another funny story along those same lines. When they dated a boy, they would never tell the boy that they had a twin. And so one time my mom was dating this guy. She didn't like him. So she invited him to their apartment that she shared with Aunt Miriam, Dota Miriam. So Dota Miriam answers the door. He doesn't recognize because they look alike. They sit down to listen to music. He leans over to give her a kiss. My mom jumps out of the closet. He ran and was never found again. So my mom was a sergeant major. My mom was a draftswoman. My aunt was a nurse. My aunt ends up marrying a Sabra, a native Israeli. My mom at the time was dating a guy who she really loved. And finally, she's being told that she has to meet his mother. So the mother says, so tell me about your family. And my mom said, what do you mean? I lost 119 family members in the Holocaust. The only family I have is my twin. The mother broke off the engagement because she wanted her future in-law to have a big family. So now I'm going to put the story together, so if you're all still with me. So now my father has finished podiatry school, pharmacy school. He's a pharmacist in Terre Haute, big Purdue fan. He goes to visit Leo to look for a wife in Connecticut, no wife there. So now he's coming to Israel because Shlomo works for Ma'ariv. So, and my mom would never tell this part of the story, never, so with her blessing I tell you. So my uncle Shlomo put a personal ad in the newspaper and mentions that my father was a Holocaust survivor. So my mom, obviously been through this bad relationship that she was punished for not having a big family, thought, well, surely my dad's family would understand. So they go out on 3 dates. My dad spoke no Hebrew. My mom spoke no English. Everything was dictionaries. On the 3rd date, my dad asked my mom a question. She said yes. He pulls out a ring, and they're engaged. True story. So they had a ceremony on Dizengoff Street in Israel. And so my dad was a pharmacist in Terre Haute. My mom was still in the IDF. And so it took a couple months to get out of the Army. So she flies to New York and is greeted by Leo, my uncle Leo on my dad's side, and his wife. They speak no Hebrew. She has a cousin from Israel there. So Leo's wife puts a corsage on my mom's lapel, and women at that time apparently in Israel didn't wear corsages. So in Hebrew, my mom tells her cousin, what is this stupid flower? I want to take it off. It's embarrassing. And the cousin says, no, don't take it off. You'll insult your in-laws. When you get to the restaurant, say you're hot. So my mom gets to the restaurant, says hot, takes off the jacket. Everybody orders steak. Everybody orders well. So my mom wanted to sound very debonair. So when it came to her, she said, well, well. So when the steak came out, it was like a brick. So they get to West Hartford where Uncle Leo, Dad Leo lived, and they call my dad in Terre Haute. My dad says, Eva, all my friends, their wives, want to throw you shower. So my mom's looking in the dictionary. She thinks, well, maybe it's a mikveh. And so she says, Mickey, thank you very much, but tell friends I take shower alone. That was my mom's first day in the United States. So a couple years later, I'm born. I have a younger sister. And my first language, believe it or not, in Terre Haute, Indiana, I was fluent in Hebrew. When I go back to Israel, it comes back to me. Rabbi, I'm sorry, I'm not fluent anymore. But when I go back to Israel, I can hear it. I can think in Hebrew, which is really strange. So a couple little anecdotal stories. When I'm 7 years old, we knew a lot of the stories. We were told things at very age-appropriate levels, and I'll give you one example. My sister's 5 Terre Haute's about an hour and a half from Indianapolis, one synagogue, there was one other survivor, maybe 100 Jewish families. And so my sister's playing next door, 5 years old, and we were used to, when my mom did the dishes, to see her Auschwitz number. So my sister, after dinner at Mrs. Baker, not Jewish, is on the left side of Mrs. Baker, and she said, Mrs. Baker, 5 years old, where's your number? I thought all mommies have numbers. Mrs. Baker, very smart, said, Rena, you might want to ask your mom. So the houses were very middle class. Mommy, I'm at Jill's house, and I don't understand. Mrs. Baker doesn't have a number. I thought all mommies had numbers. I think most mothers would not tell a 5-year-old. They would say, well, you're too young. Not my mom. She said, look, Rena, remember your father and I told you and your brother that bad people did bad things to us, and one of those bad things was they put a number on my arm. Oh, and Mrs. Baker, she didn't have those bad things. Right. So we understood at a very basic level anything we wanted. There were no questions that were not answered. More my mom than my father. My dad would make jokes. And I thought they were pretty normal. Every couple of years we'd go to Israel. I felt like a chameleon. In Terre Haute, I could be with all the Gentiles. In Israel, I felt, because I was there with family. I had Leo lived in Connecticut, so we would go to Connecticut every now and then. So things changed. I played tennis. And so, we did all the family vacations. When I was in 5th grade, one of the bad things that happened, during Halloween in Terre Haute, kids throw corn kernels at the house, run to the next house. Seems like a benign act. When my mom hears the corn rattle the windows and the doors, she thought immediately of her childhood when her dad did nothing. So the next day, these were all my classmates in 5th grade. The next day, she hides by the tree in the front of the yard, starts chasing these kids around the neighborhood. I would hear the next day at school, oh, what are you doing tonight? Oh, Mrs. Core, she's nuts. She'll chase you around. Things escalated. 4th day, we had a PTA meeting. I came home. We had swastikas on our house. Go home, dirty Jew. I never heard the word dirty Jew. I didn't know what it was. I'm a 5th grader. So my mom thought she would call the parents. Mike, your son's doing this thing. Can't you tell him that, Karen, can't you tell him, oh, Eva, they're just having fun. So she gave a lecture at the school. Her accent was so bad, nobody could understand her. She cried all the way through it. It did not help. So this went on for 2 Octobers in a row. And then she got the bright idea that every October, flights to Israel were cheap. So she went for the next 20 years to Israel every October to see Miriam, to see other family. And so they would do the corn to my dad, and he would turn off the light, take a nap, watch his favorite ball game in the dark. He didn't care. And quickly the fun died out. But this is something that for me was very, difficult. I would hear kids talk about my parents, and I can remember 14, 15 years old asking my mom, why can't you be like the other moms? Which I regret saying. So one of the other things that kind of changed things, I was 16, 17 years old. It was about 2 years after Roots. Some of you remember the miniseries Roots. NBC has a miniseries Holocaust. And my mom finds out about this and isn't sure if it's a documentary or perhaps a movie. So she calls the local NBC affiliate in Terre Haute and says, is this a movie or is this a documentary? And they say, well, it's a movie. Why are you asking? Oh, well, I survived Auschwitz. I'm a Mengele twin. You're a what? So she went on to explain what a Mengele twin is. And I said, well, maybe the last night, do you want to bring your family to the studio and then we'll put you on the news set and talk about your experiences for Vigo County, the Wabash Valley? And so she said, sure. She had not been giving lectures, but her accent was much better. And so the last scene of the movie, if you remember the movie, there's a little boy after liberation kicking her soccer ball. I'm 16 years old. Look over at my dad. Sorry. Crying hysterically. My father. So, I knew that he saw himself in the little boy. So, my mom, with her emotions in check, gave a really good interview. And I left that news studio, realized I needed to help my father kind of come to terms with his past and kind of encourage my mom to speak. And that was from high school into college. And then in 1983-84, my mom met another Mengele twin, and she realized that a lot of people didn't know what a Mengele twin was. She went to the library in Terre Haute in 1982 or 83. There was not one word, one book, one article about Mengele twins. So she thought, well, I know of a couple Mengele twins. Let's form an organization. Of course, she named herself president. My Aunt Miriam was vice president. They had a whole board of directors of all Mengele twins. And I thought, okay, that's kind of nice. What's going to happen next? And my mom always had something next. So the next thing is in 1985, and we're getting toward the end here. 1985, we go to Auschwitz for the first time, the 40th anniversary. The weird thing for me is I did not have textbooks about the Holocaust. My parents were my textbooks. And the weird thing for me was I knew where everything was, even though I'd never been there. I knew where the selection platform was. I knew where barracks was. I knew where everything was. And so we had about 8 or 9 twins on that trip. The following week, we had a mock trial of Mengele at Yad Vashem, and that led ultimately to Mengele's bones being discovered, which we can discuss, debate, in June of 1985 in Embu, Brazil. And so my mom realized after meeting all these other Mengele twins that a lot of them were starting to have health problems. So she was on now a crusade, and my aunt was not yet sick. But in 1986, Yom HaShoah, this is a Capitol Rotunda, Washington, D.C., my mom did not make a noise. She held up a sign that said Mengele twins support H.R. Bill 255, which was for reparation money for all the Mengele twins. The officer on the left in the uniform, David Wells, approached my mom and said, ma'am, you need a permit to have this placard. She didn't have a permit. She rolled up her sleeve and said, there's my permit, her number. And the officer in the brown leisure suit, the boss, said, let's drag her out of here. So Elie Wiesel was speaking. My mom is being dragged from the Capitol Rotunda. She's taken downstairs, and we've become friends, our family, with David Wells. And I gave this talk in Baltimore in October, and he told me I didn't know this part of the story. They take her downstairs, and my mom is crying hysterically. She sees somebody in uniform. She obviously has, images of what happened to her. So he is not Jewish. His name's David. For whatever reason, I think when he was a little kid, somebody gave him a Star of David. And so he takes out the Star of David and says, Jew, Jew, meaning I'm a Jew, even though he wasn't. Finally, my mom settles down. They give her a warning, but she was terrified. So she flies back to Indiana, and I can remember her calling me. She goes, I think they're going to kill me. She was paranoid. I go, Mom, nobody's trying to kill you. And I didn't know the entire story. And so now, when things are bad, and she now, people were making fun of her. She had death threats. We would have death threats. I mean, it got routine. I would pick up the phone. I go, yeah, it's another death threat. I just got used to it. Well, when things are bad and things get worse, how do you respond? So in the same year I had cancer, my mom's twin Miriam was going into kidney failure. So in 1987, after I was healthy, at least healthier, my mom flies to Israel to donate a kidney to my aunt. They were identical match. When they took the kidney out of my aunt's body, it had not developed beyond the age of 10 when she was in the camp, when they injected her with something in isolation. Unfortunately, 2 years later, my aunt died. And my relatives in Israel, unfortunately, very religious. So my mom gets a voicemail. I'm sorry to tell you, your sister has just passed away. The funeral's in 5 hours. So my mom, I remember, crying, saying, never buried a family member. So now she is depressed, and what is she going to do? And she still was doing real estate. And then a couple months later, trying to search what her focus should be, she gets a phone call from a Dr. John Michalczyk from Boston College. He's a professor, medical ethics, and he says, Eva, I'm sorry to hear about Miriam. He said, I don't know if you want to start lecturing again, but I have an interesting opportunity. Do you like to lecture to doctors? And my mom said, oh, of course, I like lecturing to doctors because they think they know everything, and I'll put them in their place. Well, we have a medical ethics meeting here in Boston. I'd like you to be the keynote speaker. Then he said something strange, and he said, well, Eva, maybe you could bring with you one of those Nazi doctors. So my mom responded, as only she could. She said, well, Dr. Michalczyk, where do you think I can find one of those guys? The last time I looked, they were not advertising in the yellow pages. Oh, you'll think of something, Eva. I'm sure you'll think of something. The last project that my mom and my aunt worked on in 1992 was for ZDF, a German network. And when the final movie came out, the documentary, there was a Nazi doctor named Hans Mooch who was cleared of all charges. He helped save 20-some Jewish doctors at Auschwitz. So my mom had an idea. Maybe he knew what was injected into the twins. He worked at Auschwitz alongside Mengele. So we had friends in Amsterdam with Dutch TV, so they contact Dr. Mooch's family. The response was, oh, he'll give you an interview, but he's not coming to Boston. You got to go to Germany. My mom was terrified to go to Germany. Just hearing German language gave her nightmares. So the Dutch TV crew with some family friends go with her. I wasn't on that trip. My mom was very, very nervous. The last time she had interacted with a Nazi doctor, they were not so nice. And so she first questioned to Dr. Mooch, Dr. Mooch, what do you know about Mengele's experiments? Eva, I'm sorry, I don't know anything. He kept everything to himself. I'm so sorry you came all this way for that. And he said, but I have nightmares too. My mom said, whoa, you have nightmares? I thought we were the ones with the nightmares. Dr. Mooch, why do you have nightmares? Well, you know about the 20-some Jewish doctors that I helped save. I'm happy about that, but I'm not so proud about something else. Well, what are you talking about? Well, periodically I had to stand outside the gas chamber. When the last body stopped moving, I signed one death certificate. He went on to describe in great detail the operation of the gas chamber, the operation of the camp. My mom was always a very quick thinker. And she said, Dr. Mooch, a little over a year, we're going back to Auschwitz. For all the people, this is 1993, for all the people that said the Holocaust didn't happen in 1993, for all the people that minimized it, will you come with us to Auschwitz in January of 1995 to tell the world what you just told me in your living room? He said yes. So my mom comes back to Terre Haute, and I hear the story, and she said, well, he doesn't know anything about the Mengele experiments, but he's coming with us to Auschwitz for the 50th anniversary. And of course, now my aunt had passed away, and a lot of the Mengele twins lived in Israel, and my aunt was always kind of the buffer. And I said, Mom, this is not a good idea. You should not do this, a big mistake. I don't care what you think. He's going to document history. Now I need a way to figure out how to thank him. How do you thank a Nazi doctor? I said, I don't know. So she went to the local Hallmark card shop in Terre Haute, Indiana for 2.5 hours looking for an appropriate thank you card. Eva, what are you looking for? I'm just looking. My parents didn't drink alcohol much. She went to the local liquor store, nothing seemed appropriate. This went on for months. And then about 6 months before January of 95, she called me. She goes, I figured it out. In my name only, and I emphasize that, in my name only, the highest honor I could give another human being is to forgive them. I want to forgive him for being a Nazi. In my name only. This is the best way I can thank him. He will truly appreciate it. This is a gift for him. I, of course, said, Mom, I don't think this is so smart. I don't care what you think. Now I need to write a letter, a document, because my English, her fifth language was English. I'm going to take it to my English professor. So she prepares a document and takes it to her English professor to make sure there's no punctuation mistakes. Dr. Kaufman says, Eva, there's no mistakes, but I think you're forgiving the wrong guy. My mom says, no, no, no. I am thanking Dr. Munch in my name only. It's the highest honor. Well, you should think about it. So on January 27th, 1995, this is my mom with Dr. Munch en route to the ceremony, which was at the ruins of a gas chamber. I was there, and my sister was there, Dr. Munch's son and daughter, granddaughter. There were about 15 Mengele twins. They were not happy. Somebody asked me this question earlier. They were not happy with my mom. They were not happy that my mom was bringing a Nazi doctor, let alone what was about to happen. And this is important because this is frequently misportrayed in the media. I've seen this 2 or 3 times since my mom passed away. Dr. Munch knew nothing about my mom's thank you. Dr. Munch told the world what he had told my mom in his living room, and then my mom said, I want to thank you, and the highest honor is that I want to forgive you in my name only. I remember a reporter from Bulgaria asking my mom, well, so you've forgiven Dr. Munch. How about Dr. Mengele? No, I want to forgive Dr. Munch because this is the way I'm going to thank him in my name only. So over the spring, summer of 95, my mom said, you know what? I've been thinking about this. Maybe I need to continue my forgiveness. I need to forgive my mom, which she resented her mom, resented her dad, hated herself for hating her parents. And then she's going to forgive Mengele in her name only. And the last part, which I always get subject to debate and controversy, she wanted in her name only to forgive all Nazis. And I said, Mom, you're opening up a huge can of worms. You're saying that you're going to forgive all Nazis in your name only, but all Nazis did not directly harm you. Yes, Alex, I understand that, but I don't want some other Nazi doctor coming saying, I worked with Mengele for a couple years, and I know Mengele, so I want you to forgive me too. She wanted to move forward. She knew she was opening herself up for debate and criticism, but she said, this way I can move forward. And I truly believe that was 1995. My mom passed away during one of our trips to Auschwitz in 2019. So I truly believe, if my math is correct, which wasn't earlier, I truly believe that she lived another 20-some years of her life much healthier and happier. So we have a museum, 30th anniversary. We have Colleen's from the museum in the back, development if you want to speak to her. But we have a museum. My mom would tell you it's a small museum with a big message. And so I'm on the board of directors now, and we have a lot of plans. But my mom was always very proud of this museum. You probably know that in 2003 it was burned down by a white supremacist. I can explain that later if you like. So my mom lectured. This is the old museum before it was burned down. The picture on the right is one of the January trips. I've been to Auschwitz now 30 times. I went with my mom over 20 times. The picture in the middle is in Block 6. My mom, as she got older, her mobility was less. She would just sit in that room and point at herself. So a couple last things, and then we'll go to our surprise guest, which is not a big surprise. So my dad's life lessons, just be honest, very straightforward, be hardworking, be humble. He always told me to say thank you and look somebody in the eye, and he was very, very tough. A lot of people didn't realize that. My mom's life lessons were a little bit more worldly. Never give up. Prevent prejudice by judging somebody only in their actions and the content of the character, not on their hair color, their eye color, their skin color. Of course, forgive your worst enemy, will heal your soul and set you free. That number 4, she would tell parents in the audience, when you go home, give your kids and grandkids an extra hug. And for you kids in the audience, give your parents and grandparents an extra hug. For those kids like my mom who didn't have parents. And then to Kum Alon, be the change that you want to see. So there's a movie out. This is almost always where I cry. There's a movie out that's been out for about 7 years called EVA-7063. The very last scene of the movie is my mom from the selection platform looking up at the heavens, saying, Mom, I hope you're proud of me. Sorry. I will tell your story. Now today, I obviously have the same words. I say, Mom, Dad, I hope you're proud of me. I will tell your story. So I want to thank you. I appreciate it. We're going to have the surprise guest. So we're going to do I'm ready for you. So before we go to the surprise guest, I'm happy to answer any question before, but thank you so much. No, I'm ready. We'll do this first and then, thanks. So the surprise guest, yes, go ahead.
Was the substance that was injected ever discovered as to what it was or what it was supposed to be doing?
What was this? Whatever the substance was injected to the twins, did we ever find out? We've never truly found out. That's a great question. One time, 15 years ago, we were at Auschwitz, and my mom were taken to a lab. And I don't know if you know this part, but Bayer Corporation that makes Bayer aspirin was paying for these experiments done by Mengele under the name of I.G. Farben. You ready for me? Oh, good. There she is. And so when they gave us vials that had liquid in it, my mom begged them to analyze it. They never did. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this technology. You're going to...
Yeah, so you want to let them ask you and then you'll ask your...
I'm going to ask her a question just to demonstrate. Eva, what is your favorite food?
I don't know. I like all kind of things. I like McDonald's, my favorite restaurant. Chicken McNuggets. I like peanut butter and jelly. But I like all the fattening sweet stuff except I can't eat it.
So if you want me to ask her a question, I will. I'll ask one more, and then if you have questions, you can ask her. Most of the time, people want to talk to her and not so much me. Yes. Eva, tell us about your high school.
After the war, in October of 1945, we entered school and we went to high school in the big city where my aunt lived for 5 years. And we were just about ready to, at age 16, we were very advanced, ready to get our high school diploma. But because we got our visa, we were not willing to stick around. So we left Romania without a high school diploma. I arrived in Israel speaking no Hebrew. Now we had to learn Hebrew and learn about Jewish history, Jewish literature, language, and Bible. And Bible was the biggest problem. I had to learn 40 chapters by heart, which I couldn't possibly learn, and I flunked Bible 3 times. I could not get my high school diploma in Israel, and so I arrived in the United States after I married my husband without a high school diploma. I learned a lot of English. I learned English very fast, and one of the best ways, in addition to watching television, was that my children were growing up and they wanted me to read them fairy tales. And I loved those fairy tales because I could understand the words. It was the level of my English knowledge. And I read them with great enthusiasm. And I continued to read with my children. And then one of my friends suggested that I knew enough English to get a high school diploma. And I needed a high school diploma because I wanted to be a realtor, and I couldn't go to real estate school without it. So I applied for a test, a GED, and I passed it immediately, got my high school diploma. Now that I had a high school diploma, I wanted a college degree. So I decided to go to school, and actually a funny story, I took my first class, was Holocaust education, and I went up to the professor and I told him that I hoped I wasn't going to flunk his class because it would have been very embarrassing to survive the real thing and flunk his class. He didn't understand what I was saying, but that was the reason that I took Holocaust 101. because the academic world was very threatening to me, and I wanted something that I was familiar with. I went to college for 11 years and graduated in 1990 with a degree, Bachelor of Science. And I'm glad I did the work because I feel very proud to be able to accomplish that.
Does anybody have a question for her? Yes, in the back, and then you. I'll relay it. Well, you tell me, and then I'll. Eva, how did other survivors react to your forgiveness?
Well, it's not fair, but when they see me, is it fair for them to be angry with me? I am not angry with them. I kind of feel sorry that they are angry, really. And when I was in Germany last year, there were about 20 survivors and their children. And we had lunch every day at a nearby church. After I read my statement in court, telling Oscar Groening that I have forgiven him, I thought it would have been a good opportunity for the other survivors and me to try to talk about that. Instead, when I addressed them, they all walked away to another table and refused to talk to me. I thought, good grief, we are 70 years after the liberation of Auschwitz, and these were all Auschwitz survivors. And they find it such a big crime that I forgave the Nazis. And when I asked, on occasion they will talk to me, they say, you hurt us. And I said, did I shoot you? Did I pick up a broom and hit you? What do you mean I hurt you? How on earth does it hurt you that I forgive the Nazis? I do suggest that it helped me a great deal, and if you might want to get rid of your pain, you might try it, but that is all I do. So how I hurt you? Please describe precisely. And they never, ever give me an answer. So if they envy me that I am able to do it, they ought to say so. Because if they do envy me, then they are looking for the same situation to be sometime in the future as I am. But it is confusing to me to hear from them that I am hurting them. I never wished, and I never will wish, any survivor of any atrocity to hurt. Or would I participate in anything that would hurt them? But by the same token, what they are angry with me,
I've never heard this
that I am not willing to be a victim again. And on that whole beautiful God's earth, I don't think that there is ever a human being who would volunteer to be a victim. And I refuse to volunteer to be a victim again.
Thank you. I never heard her ask that. I'll do one more, and then we'll finish up. Yes.
Eva, I heard that you returned to Auschwitz for 50 visits. Did you do that as an educator for the next generation?
Eva, when you returned to Auschwitz, did you try to educate our young people about the Holocaust?
That was an unclear question to me.
Let me ask this differently. Eva, what life lessons can you tell the people of Delray Beach about?
There are many important lessons that I have learned from my life, and I feel that those lessons can be used by many young people like you. And as I am looking at you, I realize that even growing up in the United States, and even if you have loving parents, and that would be a wonderful idea for every child to have a loving parent. And even if your loving parents have a lot of money, even to buy designer jeans with holes in them, even then, you and every young person wants to know, how on earth do I fit into this big, big mixed up world? Will I be able to accomplish in life what I set out to do? And I can tell you one thing, that if you give up, nothing will happen. On the other hand, if you keep trying and hammering away, it is your wonderful mind that will come up with answers that will work. I had no idea how to survive Auschwitz. There was no school to teach me. I tried different ideas, and here I am, 71 years later. I am very happy that I am alive and I can tell my story.
Okay. Say again? It was part of the USC Dimensions and Testimony, USC Showa, yes. This was 2014, so she died age 80. Age 80. One last question. Eva, what is your favorite song?
Well, my most favorite song is the Man from La Mancha, The Impossible Dream. I'll try. To dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to try when your arms are too weary, to reach the unreachable star. This is my quest, to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, I think that's about it I can remember right now. I know to reach the impossible dream.
Thank you very much. I want to be considerate of your time. I'll be in the back signing books. Rabbi, thank you so much. Thank you as well.
There's that beautiful reading at the back of Mishkan Tefillah before the Kaddish that says there are some stars that shine so brightly above that shall never ever go out, and she is certainly one of them. Thank you, Alex, for lighting that star for us and keeping it burning. And God bless Mom, and Dad, and Sis, and Aunt. They will not ever be forgotten. They do have copies of the book for sale in the back. Thank you all for coming, and stay in tune. We have a lot of programs here in addition to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur here at Temple Sinai. So check the newspapers and always check the temple website. Thank you. Shalom. Good Yantif.
Well, I know he would sit people down and interview them and ask them any questions that somebody else would ask.
And then it takes all the
They did a
information.
60-minute thing on it, so I was just wondering how old was she when they did this, but it's incredible that they did this because the whole of the survivors are dying now.